Hello, can you see the screen? Is it okay? Screen share? Okay, we will start now. Okay, lecture is general properties and classification of parasites. Basically, this is the first lecture of parasitology. So, information in this lecture will be very useful in the future lectures of individual parasites. So, first we should learn about what is parasite. Parasite. What is the definition of parasite? Parasite is a living organism which depends on a living host for its survival and derives nutrition from the host without giving any benefit to the host. Basically, parasite always take nutrition and everything from the host, but no benefit to the host, maybe damage to the host. So, in microbiology, in general terminology, we are using that parasitology. Parasites, we are using parasite, a part of parasitology. But the literal meaning of parasite is anything which is living on a living host and getting nutrition from the host and no benefit to the host is a parasite. So, a literal meaning is that even bacteria, virus, fungi, all are parasites basically. They are living in and depends on the living host, even bacteria, viruses. So, but here we will be talking about the part of parasitology only. What are types of parasites? Types of parasites are, one is ectoparasite. As the name suggests, ectoparasites means that which lives on the external surface of the host. It is named as a ectoparasite. And when ectoparasite is there on the surface of the host, term used is infestation of the infestation due to that ectoparasite. One example is in scabies. In scabies, Sarcoptes scabii is a mite which produce scabies. Scabies is a skin disease, so it's on the skin only on the external surface. So it's named as a ectoparasite. This mite of scabies is ectoparasite. Then comes the endoparasite. Endoparasite is parasite which lives within the body of a host, is endoparasite. And all parasites like protozoan and helminthic parasites are endoparasites. Because either they are living in the intestines or in the blood, so they are endoparasites inside the human body. Then comes the obligate parasite. Obligate parasite, as the name suggests, obligate. Obligate means that they cannot exist without their host. When they can't exist without their host, they are named as a obligate parasites. One example is malarial parasite. Malarial parasite is a parasite, Plasmodium species causing malaria is an example of obligate parasite. Then comes the facultative parasites. Again, the name says facultative. Facultative are which can live in the host as well as outside the host. They can live free living also. They can live without host also. They are facultative parasites. So one example is free living amoeba. Free living amoeba is one example. Free living amoeba are Naegleria fowleri is one example, which can cause meningitis, meningoencephalitis in human being. So they can live in the host as well as in the environment, in the free living, in the water also they can remain. So then comes the accidental parasite. Accidental, again the name, as the name suggests, accidental parasite. They are basically unusual to that host, particular host. They are basically a parasite of some other host, but in human beings, they accidentally humans get that parasite. Like Echinococcus granulosus, which is mainly present in the dogs. when human beings contact the dogs and come in the context of dogs, they get accidentally they get that Echinococcus granulosus may occur, causing the hydrated disease. Echinococcus granulosus is a causative agent of hydrated disease. Then comes the aberrant parasite. Aberrant parasite is which they can't live or develop further in a host. They enter in a host, but they can't live or develop further. Like these are named as apparent or wandering parasites. One example is Toxocara canis. Toxocara canis is basically present in dogs and in dogs, Toxocara canis. But when human beings are contacted with this Toxocara canis, they enter in the subcutaneous region, and they are wandering inside under the skin. So subcutaneously. So they are wandering. They are not developing there further, but they are wandering. So they are named as a wandering parasite or aberrant parasites. Then host. So there are two types of host, basically definitive host and intermediate host. These are two important terminology in parasitology. So what is host number one? Host is defined as an organism that harbors the parasite and provides shelter and nourishment to the parasite. That is host. So definitive host is that host in which parasite undergoes sexual reproduction is called the definitive host. Wherever parasite is having a sexual reproduction in that particular host, that host will be named as a definitive host. Like, for example, in most of the parasites, human beings are definitive host, with some exceptions. Like in malarial parasite, sexual reproduction takes place in mosquitoes. So mosquito becomes the definitive host and man becomes the intermediate host in malaria. Then intermediate host. In intermediate host, is that host in which the larval or asexual stages of a parasite are found, is called an intermediate host. Either larval forms of parasite or asexual stages of parasites. Like malarial parasite, we have asexual multiplication takes place in the human beings. So man becomes the intermediate host. So some protozoan parasites require two hosts to complete their life cycle. Like a Trypanosoma brucei, which causes sleeping sickness, it multiplies in arthropod, CC fly, that transmits the disease to human beings. So human beings is the definitive host, and arthropod, that is CC fly, is the intermediate host. In helminths, a definitive host is the one which harbors the adult form of the parasite, whereas an intermediate host harbors the larval form of the parasite. In parasitology, basically two types of parasites are there: protozoal, which are unicellular, and helminths, which are multicellular. So in multicellular, that is helminths, a definitive host is in which one harbors the adult form. So definitive will be adult forms are there of the parasite. Intermediate forms, intermediate host will harbors the larval forms. Like for example, in tapeworm infections, humans are the definitive host because adult worms live in the human intestine, while cattle and pigs act as an intermediate host. There are two types of tapeworm, Taenia saginata and Taenia solium, and the Taenia solium pigs act as an intermediate host, and Taenia saginata cattle act as a intermediate host because larval stages are there in the muscles of these animals. So most of the parasitic diseases, humans are the definitive host, but some exceptions, as I said, that malarial parasite. Other exceptions are Toxoplasma gondii, Echinococcus granulosus, where humans are as an intermediate host. That reservoir host, it is the host that harbors the parasite and acts as an important source of infection. A parasite remains there in that reservoir host and not producing disease, but acts as a reservoir, remains as a reservoir, and can infect the human beings anytime. Then terms are there. Zoonosis. Zoonosis is a term used to describe an infection which is primarily confined to animals, and human beings get the infection when it is transmitted from animals to human beings, either directly or indirectly by the vector. So directly also, indirectly also. So parasitic diseases that are zoonotic are leishmaniasis by sand fly. It occurs by sand fly vector. Hydrated disease by handling with the dogs. So these are the examples of zoonotic diseases. Then vector. What is vector? Vector is an agent, usually arthropod, that transmits the infection from one human being to another. That is a vector. A vector can be either biological or mechanical. Parasites multiply in the biological vectors, but they don't multiply in mechanical vectors. As the name says, biological means parasite is multiplying in that vector. Mechanical means not multiplying, but only as a carrier, that is acting as a carrier. Like CC fly is a biological vector of Trypanosoma brucei, because it's multiplying in that CC fly. But house fly acts as a mechanical vector in amoebiasis, in amoeba and amoeba histolytica. So house fly only acts as a carrier, so mechanical vector. So house fly transfers only that cyst of E. histolytica from infected feces to the food. And human beings acquire that entamoeba histolytica by consuming contaminated food. Then what is host-parasite relationship? There is association between the parasite and host. Like there are three terminology: symbiosis, commensalism, parasitism. In first one, symbiosis, as the name says, both host and parasites are dependent upon each other. One cannot live without the help of the other, and none of them suffer any harm from the association. And commensalism is that it is an association, only parasite is driving benefit without causing any injury to the host. And parasitism is association in which parasite drives benefits and the host gets nothing in return and always suffers some injury. So all parasites which will be taught to you in parasitology will be parasitism. So parasite can't live an independent life. They are all parasitic. Parasitism is the term used in the relationship, host-parasite relationship. Then sources of infection may be contaminated soil and water, raw or undercooked flesh, fish, crab and crayfishes, cyclops, watercress, food-sucking watercress, and blood-sucking insects is wrongly typed, blood-sucking insects. So contamination, soil and water. All the parasites which enter in the body through orophycal route. So contamination of water may be there. If contamination of soil is there, then how soil is contaminated? By polluted with human excreta containing some parts of the parasite. So that soil which is contaminated will act as a source of infection. Examples are roundworm, and because roundworm is a orophycal root. Then another example through contaminated soil is a hookworm. Hookworm enters in the body through a piercing of the unbroken skin. That larva enters inside the body. The person is walking on that contaminated soil barefooted, and so that larva penetrates and enters in the body. That is a hookworm, source of infection of hookworm. And most of the orophycal root parasites enter in the body through taking contaminated food or water, like Entamoeba histolytica, Giardia zambia. Giardia zambia is the causative agent of giardiasis. Entamoeba histolytica is the causative agent of amoebiasis. Then raw or undercooked flesh, like in tapeworm, Taenia solium. If pork containing the larval forms are there, in the pork containing the larval forms of Taenia solium, may cause the tapeworm infection. Or in Taenia saginata, it's a beef containing the larval stages. The larval stages is named as a Cysticercus. In Taenia solium, it is named as a Cysticercus cellulosae, and in Taenia saginata, it is named as a Cysticercus bovis. So this Cysticercus will be present in the pork. If a person is eating a contaminated pork, so that will be containing the Cysticercus cellulosae, and in the beef, contaminated beef, it will be containing the Cysticercus bovis. That is the difference between the two. Then fish. Fish also can cause infection by parasite like Diphyllobothrium latum, and so Diphyllobothrium latum infection may occur by eating fish. Then crab and crayfishes. In Paragonimus westermani infection, these are the source of infection. Paragonimus westermani is a lung infection, causes lung infection. It is also it's a lung infection, causing lung infection. Then cyclops infected with the larval forms of Dracunculus medinensis, when ingested, may lead to guinea worm disease. Dracunculus medinensis cause guinea worm disease. This is eradicated from India. Previously, this was present in the Rajasthan area, but now eradicated from whole of India. Then watercress. So in this, some aquatic plants, this parasite is there on the aquatic plants, insists in the aquatic plant, which are eaten as food by the humans, like Fasciola hepatica and Fasciola busci are some parasites which can enter in the body through this root, source of infection. Then blood-sucking insects. Blood-sucking insects are like malaria. In malaria, Plasmodium parasite enter in the body through bite of mosquito. So that is through a blood-sucking insect. Maybe another is Wuchereria bancrofti, which is causative agent of filariasis, again by mosquito. Then Leishmania donovani, which is a causative agent of Kala-Jar, which is caused by bite of sand fly. So sand fly, through sand fly. They are all blood-sucking insects or arthropods. Then portal of entry of parasites. This may be mouth, skin, sexual contact, congenital. If we see, mouth we have already talked about, that orophycal root. Amoebiasis, giardiasis, roundworm, all are through mouth, orophycal root. Most of these are through orophycal root. Giardiasis, Entamoeba histolytica, Entamoeba, this Trichuris trichura, roundworm, Taenia solium, we have talked about, pork and beef, Taenia saginata. All are through, most of them are through orophycal root. The skin we have already discussed, like hookworm, penetrates through the filariform larva, enters in the body through barefoot from contaminated soil. This is a through skin. Other mode of skin infection is, we have talked about Plasmodium and Wuchereria bancrofti by entering through the mosquito bite. That is also through skin only. Then sexual contact is by sexual route. It's a Trichomonas vaginalis. It causes vaginitis. Trichomonas vaginalis is one parasite which is sexually transmitted and causing the vaginitis. Then congenital. Congenital is Toxoplasma gondii, is one parasite which can transmit from mother to fetus. through placenta. So transplacentally this may occur, and this is Toxoplasma gondii is part of TARCH complex. TARCH complex is in which most of the causative agents of congenital infections are there. TORCH, TORCH. T is Toxoplasma gondii. O is for others. R is for rubella, that is virus. Then C is for cytomegalovirus, that is also virus. Then H is herpes, that is also virus. So some people also write torches. Torches mean ES, S for syphilis. So all of these can be transmitted through sexual transmission and through placenta, congenitally transmitted. So these are all congenital transmission may occur, and so TORCH complex is a congenitally acquired infections through transplacental. That life cycle of human parasites. These parasites can complete their life cycle in a single host or more than one host. In single host, or maybe two hosts, or maybe three hosts to complete their life cycle. This is the list of human parasites with a life cycle requiring single host. In Protozoa, Entamoeba histolytica, human being is a definitive host. Only single host is there, definitive host. Giardia zamblia, again these two, Entamoeba histolytica and Giardia zamblia, Odontodium coli, all through the orophycal route. Then Trichomonas vaginalis, again definitive host is human beings. Trichomonas vaginalis, as we discussed, is a sexually transmitted. Then helminths, protozoa are unicellular, single cell, and helminths are multicellular. In this, Ascaris lumbricoides, which is a roundworm, through orophycal route. One single only human being is the definitive host. So there is no intermediate host in all these. And Schryostoma duodenale and Necator americanus, both are hookworm. Human beings is the, and entry is through, portal of entry, as we discussed, is through barefoot, through entry as through piercing through the unbroken skin by filariform larvae. Then Enterobius vermicularis, again it's a human being is the, and entry is through orophycal route. Then Trichuris trichura, also the same route and same definitive host, that is the human being. This is for single host, no intermediate host. Then comes the parasite with a life cycle requiring two hosts, like Plasmodium species, causative agent of malaria. So mosquitoes are definitive host. As I said, that human being is intermediate host. So there are only some exceptions in which man is the intermediate host. One is malaria, that is Plasmodium species. Then another is Toxoplasma gondii. So in protozoa, then Leishmania donnellmannii causes the Kala-Jar. Again, definitive host is human beings. Sandfly is the intermediate host. And also, a human being gets the infection by sandfly. Toxoplasma gondii, cats are the definitive host. As I said, this is one exception. Human beings are intermediate host. Then Trypanosoma brucei, which is a causative agent of sleeping sickness. Humans are the definitive host. CC fly, as we discussed, is an intermediate host. Trypanosoma cruzi causes the trypanosomiasis, and it's a human being is a definitive host, and Tritomine bug is the intermediate host. And Toxoplasma gondii, which we said that again it's a congenital type of infection, one part of the TARCH complex. And then helminths. Helminths are of three types: cystodes, trematodes, and nematodes. Cystodes, Taenia solium and Taenia saginata are tapeworms. And these are human beings are the definitive host. The difference we have already discussed. Taenia solium, pig is the intermediate host, and Taenia saginata, cattle is the intermediate one. And larva is Cysticercus cellulosae in Taenia solium and Cysticercus bovis in the Taenia saginata. Echinococcus granulosus, dogs is the definitive host. This is another exception in which man is the intermediate host. It causes the hydrated cyst. and accidental, the person comes in contact with the dogs. Then trematode, Fasciola hepatica, human being is the definitive host. In all the three trematodes, Fasciola hepatica, Fasciola busci, Schistosoma, human being is the definitive host, and snails are intermediate host. And nematodes, Trichinella spiralis, human being is the definitive host, pig is the intermediate host. And Buchlaria bancrofti, human being, definitive, and mosquito is the intermediate host. One gets the filariasis through bite of mosquito. Bruggia mevai is also causative agent of filariasis. Same, human being is the definitive host, and mosquitoes are the intermediate host. Zoa, Onchocerca volvulus in human beings is the definitive host. Dracunculus medinensis, which has been eradicated from India. Cyclops is the intermediate host in Dracunculus medinensis. And in Loa, deer flies is the intermediate host. Onchocerca volvulus, black flies. All will be taught to you individually. And this knowledge will be very, very useful when you will be taught these, because most of these will be repeated there also. Then comes the human parasites with a life cycle requiring 3 hosts. So we have talked about 1 host, 2 hosts, and now 3 hosts. In cystodes, Diphyllobothrium latum is one parasite, which human being is a definitive host, and 2 intermediate hosts. First is Cyclops, and second is fish. And then trematodes, Paragonimus westermanni, which causes the lung infection. Human being is the definitive host. Snail is the first intermediate host, and crab or crayfish is the second intermediate host. Paragonimus westermanni is also called lung fluke, also called as a lung fluke because it causes lung infection. So it's also named as a lung fluke. Then comes the pathogenicity. Pathogenicity, this parasite, when leaving the tissues of host, it may cause harm also. So they can produce damage to the host, and there are different ways in which they can produce this damage, like trauma. Number 1 is trauma, in which they are attached to the intestines. Some parasites which are attached to intestine, and they are having a traumatic damage to the villi, and bleeding occurs. Like hookworm. Hookworm are attached to the intestine. They are bleeding. They are bleeding in the intestine. So person suffers from the anemia. So that is a hookworm anemia may occur in Cheilostroma duodenale or Necator americana. So that is a trauma. So trauma may occur, and sometimes like Ascaris lumbricoides, roundworm, they may produce intestinal obstruction also, because large worms are there. They are very large worms. This Ascaris lumbricoides. So they may cause intestinal obstruction, or sometimes they may lead to perforation also, intestinal perforation also. That is trauma. Then comes the lytic necrosis. Entamoeba histolytica secretes some enzymes which can lyse tissues. So lytic action may occur, and they also can penetrate into the tissue of the colon, and so they may cause the ulcers also. So this is also lytic necrosis. And then allergic manifestation. Allergic manifestation may occur due to some secretions and excretion of the growing larvae. Growing larvae are producing some secretions, and they may also produce from the dead parasite. Like another example of allergic manifestation is if hydrated cyst is there, if it ruptures, then hydrated fluid can cause the anaphylaxis. So allergic manifestation, anaphylaxis may occur. Then inflammatory reaction. Most of the parasites, they may provoke cellular proliferation and infiltration at the site of their location. The Entamoeba histolytica may lead to amoebic granuloma or amoeboma by producing inflammation of the large intestine. Then certain parasites are related to neoplasm, like Schistosoma hematobium has been associated with vesicle carcinoma or urinary bladder carcinoma. Then immunity in parasitic infection. In immunity in parasitic infection is both cellular immunity as well as the humoral immunity. In cellular immunity, cell-mediated immunity or cellular immunity, then cytotoxic T cells, natural killer cells, and that is NK cells and activated macrophages are important in activation of the CMI. But in that antibody-mediated immunity, IgM, IgG, IgE, maybe IgE is important because in most of the parasitic infection, IgE is also raised. And the first antibody, as in any infection, will be IgM, and later on it taken over by IgG. So in helminthic infection mainly and ectoparasites, IgE is raised. In the most of this parasitic infection, immunity lasts only till infection remains active. If infection is there, then immunity is there. If no infection, no active immunity. So this type of immunity is known as a concomitant immunity, which was previously named as a premonition or infection immunity. Previously it was named as a premonition immunity or infection immunity. Nowadays it's named as a concomitant immunity, means that immunity will remain in the body only when that infection is there. Once there is no infection, immunity will last only till infection is there. Then very important part, this will be very useful in the all other parasitic infection which will be taught to you. This is a general laboratory diagnosis of all parasitic infections. So very, very useful. Listen carefully and understand it. And only understand, because I have given only the headings only. So when I am talking, you just listen carefully. So it depends upon direct demonstration of parasite. That is very important. Direct demonstration of parasite. Because in parasitic infection, direct demonstration is very, very important. Direct demonstration may be in the stool examination, maybe in the blood examination, maybe in the urine examination, or maybe the genital specimen examination, maybe cerebrospinal fluid, sputum examination, tissue and aspirate examination. This is one aspect of laboratory diagnosis. Is this. Another aspect is culture. So one is direct examination, another is culture. Third is animal inoculation. Fourth is serological test. Fifth is skin test. And sixth is molecular methods. We will be coming to each one of these. So first is direct demonstration of parasite. The most important and commonly used in the laboratory is a stool examination. In stool examination, whenever stool comes, you want to know whether ova or cyst of any parasite is there or not. So what you do is, from stool specimen, on the slide, microscopic slide, you make two preparations. This is named as a wet preparation, stool wet preparation. One, you take drop of normal saline. Another, you take saline, that iodine solution, Lugol's iodine. So you mix this stool specimen in both of these with a wooden stick, and then put the cover slip over it. So this is wet preparation. Put each. So two preparations are there: normal saline and your Lugol's iodine preparation. Put a cover slip and see under low power. First see under low power, and if you find some parasite ova or cyst, then go to high power, and then you will find that you will identify under high power. You will be able to identify cyst or ova. And in microbiology, only two situations are there when you are using the high power, not the oil immersion. Oil immersion is 100x. So all bacteria are Gram staining, Gill-Nielsen, Albert staining, 100x is used. But only two situations are there when we use 40x, that is high power. One is stool examination, another is your hanging drop preparation. When you want to see motility of a bacteria, hanging drop preparation, two preparations are there. So in most of the cases like Entamoeba histolytica, you find the cyst. Why we make two preparation, iodine and normal saline? Ova, in cysts are better seen in iodine preparation. That is one. Part of cyst can be seen better. And another is you can see cyst in normal saline preparation also, but iodine is better for seeing cysts. And then another is ova. Ova can also be seen in both, but some ova are bio-stained, some are non-bio-stained. So bio-stained ova can be more appreciated in a normal saline preparation because iodine, this bio-stained ova are like a color of a iodine. So in iodine preparation, you may not able to appreciate whether it's a bio-stain or non-bio-stain. But in this normal saline, you can appreciate both. So Entamoeba histolytica cysts can be isolated. Trophozoites of Entamoeba histolytica can be detected by this method. Then Giardia lamblia cyst can be seen. Trophozoite can be seen. And so eggs of or ova of roundworm, hookworm. That roundworm means Ascaris umbricoides. Hookworm in Chylostoma duodenale can be also seen by this direct examination. Then another method of direct examination is that by the ova and cyst, trophozoites can also be seen by this method. One Jeev-Nielsen staining you must have been taught and in previous lectures. And modified Jeev-Nielsen staining is used of the fixed smear of the stool. You have fixed smear. You have make the smear, fix it, and stain with modified Jeev-Nielsen staining for Cryptosporidium parvum. Cryptosporidium parvum is one parasite which is opportunistic parasitic infection in HIV or AIDS. So here you can, they are acid fast. That's why modified Jeev-Nielsen staining is used. Modified Jeev-Nielsen staining means that sulfuric acid concentration is much lower than the concentration used for Mycobacterium tuberculosis in Jeev-Nielsen staining. So that is another way of direct examination of stool. One was wet preparation, iodine and normal saline. Another is Jeev-Nielsen, modified Jeev-Nielsen staining for Cryptosporidium parvum. So this is the most of the method. This is a gold standard for ova, cyst and others. So for intestinal parasite, this stool examination. Then sometimes stool examination is not available or is not useful. So then you use a perianal swab. Perianal swab, especially in Enterobius vermicularis. So in that perianal swab can be taken, and again you can make the that normal saline and iodine preparation, and then you can see the eggs by perianal swab. Then comes the blood examination. Blood examination is useful for only those parasites which are present in the blood, like malarial parasite. Malarial parasite is one example. You take the blood, you make the blood film on the slide and fix it, stain them, and examine for different stages of parasite, Plasmodium parasite, malarial parasite, or Plasmodium species. Then also, this is blood examination is also useful on a slide by for Leishmania donomani, causative agent of Kala-Jar. Also, you can see for by microfilaria, Wuchereria bancrofti. Also, you can make a blood film and can stain and can see. Or in Wuchereria bancrofti or microfilaria, even if you directly also without staining also you can see microfilaria. Then urine examination. The urine examination will be useful only in parasite which can infect urinary system. Like Cystosoma hematobium, I talked to you that it may cause bladder carcinoma also. So eggs of Cystosoma hematobium may be demonstrated in the urine. And sometimes there is chyluria, Chyluria, chyluria is one terminology which is used in Wuchereria bancrofti, that is filaria. So microfilaria is a larval form of Wuchereria bancrofti. So microfilaria may be demonstrated in chylous urine. In chylous urine, in filariasis, one can use this urine examination. Then comes the genital specimen examination. Genital specimen, we talked only one genital parasite, which was Trichomonas vaginalis, right? So if you have a vaginal discharge or urethral discharge, you can, wet preparation or by staining, you can see this Trichomonas vaginalis can be seen. Then comes the cerebrospinal fluid examination. We have already talked about that one free living amoeba which can freely remain in the water. So free-living amoeba like Naegleria fowleri or acanthamoeba may cause meningoencephalitis. Then in those cases, you have to, by lumbar puncture, you have to take up the cerebrospinal fluid (CSF), and you can demonstrate the trophozoites of Naegleria fowleri or acanthamoeba in that. Then sputum examination, we have already talked about that Paragonymous westermanni can cause lung infection or lung fluke. So in the sputum, you can demonstrate the ova of or eggs of Paragonymous westermanni. Or another, rarely, this roundworm may be found in the sputum. They sometimes migrate and enter in the lung, and so they may be present in the sputum. They can also be demonstrated. Then tissue and aspirate examination. Tissue and aspirate amastigote forms are there of Leishmania donnamannii, causative agent of Kazajar, may be demonstrated inside the reticuloendothelial cells. In the splenic aspirate, if you take splenic aspirate, you can, or bone marrow aspirate, or liver or aspirate from the lymph node, they can be demonstrated. Sometimes in muscle biopsy, Trichinella spiralis and Tinea Solium may be demonstrated in muscle biopsy. Or fluid aspirated from hydrated cyst in hydrated disease also can be used for demonstration of this Echinococcus granulosus. Sometimes Giardia lamblia trophozoites can also be demonstrated in the bile aspirate. Sometimes amoebic Entamoeba histolytica may cause extraintestinal amoebiasis. Extraintestinal amoebiasis means it is not besides involving intestine, it may also lead to some other tissues also. Like most common one, extraintestinal amoebiasis is hepatic amoebiasis or amoebic liver abscess. If amoebic liver abscess is there, then you can aspirate the pus from the amoebic liver abscess and can demonstrate the trophozoites of Entamoeba histolytica. Entamoeba histolytica, in stool sample, you can demonstrate cysts and trophozoite both, but in tissues, mainly it's a trophozoite can be demonstrated. This was all about direct demonstration of parasite in laboratory diagnosis of parasites in general. Then comes a culture, because another is culture. Culture is not so common in parasites. So some parasites can be cultured in the laboratory, but it's not routinely available. Which can be cultured are Entamoeba histolytica can be cultured. Then Giardia lamblia, Leishmania donnamannii can be cultured. Then comes the animal inoculation. Animal inoculation can be useful for detection of Toxoplasma gondii and Babesia species in clinical specimen, but not used nowadays. Then serological tests. Serological test can detect either antibodies or antigens in the patient serum and clinical specimens. So methods used are enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay, ELISA, or indirect hemagglutination assay, IHA. Fluorescent test like indirect fluorescent antibody test can be used. And these are being used for various parasitic infections like amoebiasis, malaria. In malaria, tests are available in which you can detect the antibody can be detected, antigen can be detected. Then visceral leishmaniasis, also antigen can be detected by these methods. So amoebiasis, malaria, visceral leishmaniasis can be used. Amoebiasis, especially extraintestinal amoebiasis, serological tests are very useful, like hepatic abscess or amoebic liver abscess. In cysticercosis is a tinea infection, that is Tinea Solium infection, which may lead to some cysticercosis in the brain also. In these also serological tests are very useful. Then skin test, Cassoni test was previously used for diagnosis of hydrated disease, that is Echinococcus granulosus, not used nowadays. Then molecular methods are very important. Nowadays, molecular methods are used most of the parasites, like DNA probes and PCR, polymerase chain reaction. Polymerase chain reaction is most commonly used, And but the DNA probes are also available, which can be used for diagnosis of parasitic infections. DNA probes detect parasitic DNA in clinical specimens. Probes are available for diagnosis of Plasmodium falciparum, Wuchereria bancrofti. PCR, what is PCR? Polymerase chain reaction is a DNA amplification. Small quantity of DNA is converted into large quantity of DNA, and which can be detected then. So in clinical specimens, small quantity is there, maybe very small, so that can be amplified, and DNA can be amplified and then can be detected. These can be used for intestinal amoebiasis, giardiasis, and other intestinal parasitic infections. This is all properties of, this will be very useful when you will be taught other parasites. You may make use of these knowledge. Then classification of parasites. Classification of parasite is same that it is as any other, because all living organisms belong to 5 kingdoms. There are one is kingdoms. 5 kingdoms are there: Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, Animalia. So protozoa are eukaryote and unicellular. As I said, protozoa are unicellular organisms, and they belong to kingdom Protista. While helminths, which are multicellular eukaryote, and they belong to Animalia. So Animalia, helminths, and Protista is the protozoa. And protozoology and helminthology are 2 branches of parasitology which deal with the study of protozoa and helminths respectively. Then another terminology is medical entomology. Medical entomology deals with all the study of all arthropods which act as a vector in the parasitic disease. So medical entomology. So like helminths, these arthropods also belong to kingdom Animalia. So kingdom Animalia, helminths are there, arthropods are there, kingdom Protista, protozoa are there. So first is kingdom, then phylum, then class, then order, then family, then genus, then species. Right. So these are the. You will be taught later on in every chapter when you will be taught about protozoa. A protozoa classification is separate, then helminths classification is separate. A lot of terminology is there. How many phylum are there? How many classes are there? How many orders are there? And this classification on the right side is the most commonly used classification, day-to-day classification. That is protozoa and helminths. 2 types are group are there. Protozoa is unicellular, helminths are multicellular. Both are eukaryote. In protozoa, you find amoebae. One group is amoebae. Amoeba contains the Entamoeba histolytica. Gingivalis is also there. Entamoeba histolytica is very important causative agent of amoebiasis or extraintestinal amoebiasis. Then flagellates, as the name suggests, it contains flagella. And so the Giardia zamli is one causing the giardiasis. Then Trichomonas vaginalis, which is sexually transmitted, causes vaginitis. Leishmania species causes the Kala-Jar through sandfly, and then sporozoa. Sporozoa contains the Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium falciparum, both causes malaria. Then Toxoplasma gondii, which is a congenital infection, can cause congenital infection. Toxoplasma gondii. Then ciliates can cause intestinal infection, that is named as a Brentidium coli is the one example of ciliates. Cilia is there, as the name says, ciliate. Then helminths multicellular. 3 types of helminths are there: trematodes, cystodes, and nematodes. Trematode, Fasciola species, and Schistosoma. Cystodes are Taenia species, Taenia solium, Taenia saginata, and tapeworms. Echinococcus species like Echinococcus granulosus, causing the hydatid disease, and then through dogs. Then nematodes. Nematodes may contain roundworm or hookworm. Roundworm is Ascaris lumbricoides, and hookworm may be Ankylostoma duodenale or Necator americanus. Then to differentiate the three in helminths, there are 3 types: cystodes, trematodes, and nematodes. What are the differences between this cystodes, trematodes, and this will be very useful to you when cystodes, trematodes, and nematodes will be taught to you. Basically, There are two types of helminths, are two phylum are there. One is phylum Platyhelminthes and phylum Nematoda. Phylum Platyhelminthes, the characteristic of this nematodes all come under phylum Nematoda. And this phylum Platyhelminthes contain the cystodes and trematodes. So phylum Platyhelminths are dorsoventrally flattened. They are dorsoventrally flattened or leaf-like or tape-like. As you are seeing that cystodes are tape-like and trematodes are leaf-like. And their alimentary canal is either absent or incomplete. You may see the last point that cystodes, its alimentary canal is absent, or in trematodes present but incomplete, no anus. And they are mostly hermaphrodite, as you see. Sexes, in sexes you see that they are mostly not separate. Sexes are not separate, mean they are hermaphrodite. Both sexes are there. In trematodes also not separate sexes except schistosoma, which are not hermaphrodite, dioecious. So that is sexes are separate in schistosoma. That is one exception. And then these in the cystodes are under class Cystoidea. Cystodes are under class Cystoidea. They are named as cystodes or also named as tapeworms. While those in the trematodes are under class Trematoda. They are termed as trematodes or flukes. Flukes. They are also named as flukes. As I gave one example, lung fluke. So there are other flukes also. So flukes are there, lung fluke or other flukes. Then phylum Nematoda. Nematoda are they are elongated or cylindrical. Their shape is different, and they are unsegmented. In cystodes and trematodes, cystodes are segmented, trematodes are unsegmented, and nematodes are also unsegmented. And they have a body cavity. If you see last but one, that body cavity is absent in both cystode and trematode, but present in nematodes. So body cavity is present, and complete alimentary canal is also there in nematodes, but no circulatory system. And a simple excretory system is also there in the this nematode, and a body wall is there. They are sexes are separate. So dioecious are there. Their sexes are separate. There are two classes in nematodes: Adenophoria, Saccharinatia. This will be taught to you later on also. They are named as nematodes. They are nematodes. Now, just to recapitulate again, shape. Cystodes are tape-like, so that's why they are named as tapeworms. Trematodes, leaf-like, fluke, and elongated and cylindrical nematodes. Body segmented in cystode and unsegmented in nematodes. Sexes not separate, trematodes, except schistosoma. Separate sexes, nematodes. Head contains sucker, often with hooks. These cystodes contain suckers, often with hooks. Contains suckers, but does not have hooks. Both suckers and hooks are absent in nematodes. A well-developed buccal cavity and may be present in some species. And body cavity absent in both cystode and trematode, present in nematodes. And alimentary canal absent in cystode, present but may be incomplete in trematodes. No anus, present and complete. So if you see from cystode to nematodes, advancement is there. If you are seeing advancement, body cavity absent, present. Alimentary canal absent, present, but incomplete, complete. So advancement is going on. So more advancement. Sex is not separate, separate. So segmented bodies, unsegmented elements. So it's a higher side. It's going on higher side. So suckers contain suckers with hooks, no suckers without hooks, and no sucker, no hooks. So again advancement is there. So this shows that how it happens. And that's all about. Thank you. If you have any query, then we can discuss.